Welcome to Functional Spirituality. In this podcast, I offer you a philosophical exploration. How can I find deep alignment, meaning, and coherence in a surface culture of survival and speed? My name is Ava, and I'm the creator of FS, and I use my degree in philosophy and my experience in traditional spirituality for nearly 2 decades to help bring meaning and functionality, as well as nervous system healing and awakening into the real moments of life. And today I want to speak a little bit more about our modern yoga industry. Whether you're a practitioner of yoga or you're interested in spirituality, personal development, otherwise, this is going to be really interesting for you because what we see inside of our yoga industry is common across all of our spiritual and personal development modalities. It's very typical of our new age spirituality, which really is the type of spirituality we find ourselves in now. It's very rare to be practicing anything that's not touched by or under the umbrella of New Age spirituality, even if you don't like that term. So just last week, I sent out a newsletter to my mailing list with the subject line, "Is there a huge problem with Vinyasa?" And as you know, that's a bit part of my writing style where I like to use bold statements to hopefully bring intrigue as well as inquiry, because that's very much the point of functional spirituality, is to question things. And I received back some really strong responses, particularly from Vinyasa teachers who felt personally criticized or implicated by what I had shared. And I think the way it was written, especially if you identify as being a Vinyasa teacher, it would definitely be easy to take that personally and then to feel implicated in terms of the value, the role, the position that you take in your community. So I was criticized by it. With all kinds of responses. Of course, there was a lot of feedback that the mailer hit the nail on the head, that this is an important question that we need to be having. And this was from both practitioners and Vinyasa teachers. But from the ones that took it more critically, it was that the blog was unfair, rude, maybe that I was, guilty of financially exploiting the industry and my teachers in the studio. Yeah, and maybe that I was kind of slandering either Vinyasa teachers as a whole, or, what does that mean for me and having a studio that teaches Vinyasa? And I am a Vinyasa teacher. And I guess then the point of the mailer was not then received in those people because it's meant to make us question. And everything that I said in that newsletter, I 100% believe and would be more than happy to explain, debate, go through each of those points to prove that they are worthwhile points of consideration. But also I can see, I think I mentioned in my socials that I had actually left out the first paragraph of that mailer by accident, just through copy and paste, which kind of set up a little bit that it is a critique of our industry and the way that we need to be being more critical of the practices that we do, and especially yoga, which of course I went into detail explaining how our modern yoga phenomenon has embedded in it so many problematic elements that we see in the classes of well-meaning teachers. That doesn't matter how well-meaning we are, how much training we've done, how many decades of practice we have done, how many different trainings and styles and modalities we're a part of. We might still be not cluing in to elements that are toxic. So I thought I would elaborate here, particularly what those elements are that are toxic to human beings that practice yoga, because there are so many. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. I think most yoga teachers would be comfortable in saying that the yoga industry is a confusing mishmash of spiritually themed fitness. But I'm happy to downright say that a yoga practice can feel good and still create harm. That the yoga industry confuses trauma work with spirituality, and that students will give away their authority because the system trains them to. And these are just a few of the more painful points that I was trying to bring up in my mailer, which, this is the conversation I'm having all the time with my teachers, with my students, with my friends, with my colleagues. So I'm happy to kind of speak to it very directly. And this wouldn't be the first time that I've gotten in trouble for sending out an email. And I never know until afterwards, never ever, because I send out all kinds of emails all the time, but only afterwards. Sometimes an email that person would have needed an individual conversation, because some of what has been shared is direct and it's very easy to project, of course, when we're feeling triggered or threatened in some way. So like I said, we all intuit, or we know, that modern Vinyasa is a recent aesthetic invention. It's not an ancient lineage, but what most people don't understand is what parts of our modern yoga practice are representative of the yoga tradition in India and what parts are not. What is my position to be able to comment on the things that I'm about to share? Well, I have always been a scholar of yoga, but for the first 10 years of my yoga practice, or maybe more like 8 years of my yoga practice, I was a scholar from inside of the tradition. So that means reading manuscripts, reading manuals, reading texts, reading books from teachers from inside the tradition, from classical Hatha Yoga, from classical yoga, which is totally different, from Tantra, from, ancient Brahmanical traditions where we find the Bhagavad Gita, also cross-cultural, spiritual influences. So I was a scholar, like many practitioners can be, from inside the tradition, to deepen the validity and verifying my own practice, trying my best to from the inside and teaching from that. Then back in 2018, when I had my mental health crisis and my breakdown, I got interested in studying yoga from the outside, because it became obvious that my practice was dysfunctional, which meant that my practice wasn't coherent, because it didn't move me towards my goal of not being burnt out, not being overwhelmed, not being reactive, not being dysregulated. I had goals of being emotionally regulated, successful, aligned, relaxed, healthy, connected, in relationship. All of those goals, none of them had been met, and I had been practicing for 10 years. And not in a half-assed way, right? Full on practicing, continuously being shown that I was doing the techniques correctly and living in full alignment with these traditions. And, so my practice is obviously dysfunctional because what I was doing did not produce the outcome of the goals that I was looking for. They did produce some outcomes, and some of them were great. So for example, I experienced lots of awakening outcomes. I was able to very much connect to deep meditative states and stillness and the void and all of those transcendent qualities. But the reason that I wanted those states was because I thought they were going to give me these ultimate goals that I wanted, and I had been promised that. So I became interested in spirituality and yoga from the outside. I've been so fortunate to come across incredible teachers, and I started to study with some of my academic heroes. So scholars that study the yoga and Sanskrit tradition at a university level from the outside. A couple of them were practitioners as well, but they're looking at what the different goals of the different yoga traditions were at different times and what were the forces that shaped them. Because depending on the political and social and environmental landscape at the time, spirituality has always been deeply connected to the state and to the religion at the time. And the only ones we know about are the ones that persisted due to followership and funding. So these other external factors are also just as important as the internal factors if you are interested to be a student of yoga or student of spirituality and to study it deeply as so many of us do, right? We do courses and things. It's just as important to study the internal mechanics and what they say that they believe and how they say they do it as the external ones, to see how it's placed and what is more objectively can be noted about what is happening inside that tradition. So that's who I am. And I've spent the last, to be honest, it was really more like 2 or 3 years of going super hard into studying yoga and these other Sanskrit traditions from the outside. Of course, I continue that, but I went really hard just trying to figure out what is going on. Why is my yoga practice dysfunctional? And why am I not the only one that is experiencing this? So I think what's really important to know as a yoga practitioner, right? It's like you don't want to be seen as doing something superficial or doing something that's like lying or something that isn't quite aligned. So what is the modern Vinyasa practice? The modern Vinyasa practice draws from the entire history of religion and spirituality in India. And over the past 3,000 years, maybe 3,500 years, there has been many different dominant forms of spirituality in India. And in functional spirituality, we have a short course called The History of Hatha Yoga. It's part of our teacher training where we look at these different time periods. We have the Brahmanical tradition. We have the pre-classical yoga. We have the classical yoga tradition. We have the tantric yoga tradition, classical Hatha Yoga tradition. And then we have our modern yoga as these really big pieces that have shaped our current yoga practice. And what is very important to be noted is that these different forms of spirituality, they evolved out of each other just purely because of timeline. But in many ways, the subsequent tradition tried to one-up the previous one by changing things around and having a different goal, a higher goal, a better goal, a different practice, a different worldview. And within that new worldview, that the different type of spirituality, as it evolved, the techniques also evolved in order to try to produce the ultimate goal of that tradition. And they might have opposing goals. In fact, it's very often. And we might think that mixing all of these traditions together is inclusive, but it's actually confusing. So for example, Tantra aims to expand awareness through cultivating of energy. Classical yoga aims for stillness and separation from the body. Buddhism aims for the emptiness and non-self. Hatha yoga is all about energetic purification and visualization. New Age spirituality is a mix of so many different aims, mostly about manifestation, positivity, and emotional expression. Our modern day goals that Vinyasa really has come in to satisfy are very much about strength, flexibility, and aesthetics. And we're like, well, all those goals are awesome. Why not include them all into a practice? Yoga can absolutely be a vehicle for every single one of those goals. However, because those goals, they clash. There is an energetic conflict. If you try to produce all of those goals at once, they're not designed to work together. In fact, often they're intended to contradict and disprove one another. This is the foundation of functional spirituality and the 3-part method, which says that there's fundamentally 3 goals in our spiritual practice, and we should aim for all of them, but they have different techniques and tools. And it's not a problem to put them all into a yoga practice. That's amazing. I guess my problem is the teachers not having clarity about the techniques that they are using and teaching and implementing, and then misrepresenting the practice, because that creates confusion. That it's about marketing. How are you packaging, speaking about, like, I'm not talking about commercial only marketing. I'm talking about how are you representing the practice? Are you saying that this practice is going to heal you? What does that mean? Are you talking about nervous system regulation? There's a particular type of practice. There are particular ingredients. There is an approach that you need to take to produce nervous system regulation. Doing gymnastics and acrobats is a different goal, totally valid, super interesting for a particular type of practitioner that has a particular goal. And I am a practitioner that likes to do incredible and strong things with my body. That's a different goal than nervous system regulation. That's a different goal than spiritual peace and transcendence. In fact, this is the 3-part method. And the problem, what is the huge problem with Vinyasa, is that different spiritual goals are being represented to be one and the same thing within one practice. And also, the teachers are more than likely not aware of that. The lineage itself teaches this. So to be a good teacher is to follow your lineage and your teachers and to respect that, and to not quite, like, this is one of the key pieces of being in a surface culture of survival and speed, is that we do not question our teachers and our lineage that have given us so much, right? Our yoga practice has given us so much that we never want to question if it's actually functional. And that means that we might perpetuate this system of mixing in many different pieces that have feel-good elements to them, but are not functional in that the approach is not clearly indicating what the outcome we're working towards is. And the practice might end up being superficial because no one ever gets to go deep enough into one of the goals, and no one gets to self-select the type of practice based on the invitation for them to know about the different goals and to then be told which practice is most likely going to support them into it. It's all just mixed together. And instead, because of our surface culture, this industry of yoga and spirituality celebrates more charisma and performance rather than functional understanding. And this is like the work that I live and I breathe. You know, even the teachers that have studied under me, like, I'm just miles ahead of creating and adopting this map of really seeing, okay, this is going to produce this effect. I can see from miles away that kind of practice is going to produce this effect. And I can also see, okay, well then they're also saying that it's going to produce those effects, which is not going to happen. And also including these other practices is going to not really support that original effect that was most likely going to happen. It's most aligned with is also going to be compromised by bringing other elements in that don't quite align with it. So it's ultimately a matter of identification and understanding, having a good map, and then coherence. So, like I said, like I'm kind of miles ahead of the way that I like to think about things. But I think for most people, when they're assessing their yoga practice, they're understanding that they're taking issue with, like, as with so many of us, even the people that criticize my blog, they still, I'm sure, understand and feel that there is an issue with our modern yoga practice. That yoga is really focusing on what poses look like, the intensity of the poses, the big experiences, emotional release, big moments, impressive shapes, that it's teacher-led alignment. Some are still fully for it. They think the teacher knows best what every single body should do, but mostly people are moving away from that, but still not knowing how to do a practice or guide a practice that is body-led, that is student-led, that, according to me, is the only way for a practice to be consent-based and to be trauma-informed. Isn't just that you have a box that they tick on your clipboard when they enter the studio. A truly trauma-informed, consent-based, therapeutic, and functional yoga practice is one where the person is embodied and being invited to participate with the yoga practice instead of being led by the teacher. Because the way that yoga and most spiritual modalities are practiced is that it's based on the authority of the teacher. The teacher knows the right sequence, the right alignment, the right way to do these postures, which gives the totally false notion that the postures themselves are inherently good, right? I was taught that if I do triangle pose, I will activate my Manipura chakra and I will develop a strong willpower and also a strong digestive system. I was taught that that posture inherently has the power to do that to my system. This is a medicalization of our yoga practice. This is a manualization where the postures have the power. And if only I could fit my body into that posture, if I can align, the better I can align my physical body to that posture and that shape, literally I was taught that the benefits will then flow into me. If I can unlock that pose, the benefits will flow into me, whether it's healing grief, whether it's releasing trauma, whether it's connecting to universal love, like whatever qualities of all the chakras, of all of these things, that if I can achieve that shape, I can unlock. If I can breathe in a certain way, I will unlock it. If I can focus my mind, create certain sounds, if I can use a certain crystal, right? Or if I use a certain essential oil, I will unlock a benefit. This is an aesthetic style of yoga. It's actually just incorrect. I've spent so long in the practice trying my very best to unlock those benefits. The only way to unlock the benefits that we're looking for is through our own nervous system. Our nervous system has all of those different states within it. We have to unlock our own nervous system. We have to embody it. There's no manual for our own nervous system. It's almost infinitely complex. We try to manualize nervous system experiences with these external shapes, with whatever herbs, whatever crystals, like whatever mantras, whatever sound, like vibrations or frequencies. This is the old paradigm surface approach to yoga and spirituality. And I mean, like, I've totally gone away from whatever that blog was, just more into this understanding of what a functional yoga practice is. I think one last thing that I want to say is that there's this idea that to have a really therapeutic, meaningful, and meditative body-led practice, it needs to be slow. It can't be strong. What for sure does not align with a therapeutic, meditative, functional practice is gymnastic and acrobatic, complicated shapes that don't respect functional movement principles. But you can absolutely have a strong practice. I've done 2 incredibly strong and beautiful therapeutic yoga practice at our studio just recently. I've done them at other studios before. There are so many teachers out there who are, banging on the same drum as well. And what it means is that you're not more than likely you're not doing peak poses. You're not adding on complicated movements just in order to perform something acrobatic. That is totally valid, but it's not therapeutic, meditative, and body-led. So it's a different type of practice. And it's really important for students to know that they can absolutely pursue that. But if they choose not to pursue that, in no way are they not pursuing their healing. That's not a healing practice. That is a performative, creative, expressive, cultivating kind of practice. It's at the expense of the body and its joints. It's something that we're performing, that we're exploring. It's not guaranteed to support or strengthen the body. Strengthening movements are simple, they're deliberate, they're concise, they're very often isolated movements in order so that we could maybe do a more performative, expressive, creative, dynamic, like intense kind of practice. And we can absolutely have a strong practice that produces really meaningful effects inside of the body. There is so much to say about the modern yoga industry, about the ways that group mentality sets us up for particular trends in the industry, the way that yoga teacher trainings and that phenomenon has shaped our industry, about the history of yoga and which elements are now represented that have produced this modern postural yoga phenomenon. That yoga has always, especially postural yoga like Hatha Yoga, has always been a performative-based type of practice. This idea that putting yourself into shapes, it doesn't matter if it has a negative effect on your body, if it strains, if it depletes, if it doesn't actually support the body, that doesn't matter because you're trying to unlock these shapes. This is the origin of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga, and that's how we say it in English, Hatha Yoga. So the Sanskrit word hat means austerity. It means to burn. And it was actually originally about burning the body, performing strong austerity. So standing on the head for days, hanging from one arm for days, practicing in a ring of fire for days, for hours, holding the breath for hours, refraining from eating, refraining from sexual contact, refraining from speaking, like so many different ways of burning the body. Hatha Yoga was about austerity, doing things to the body in order, were about negating the body in order to produce energetic and spiritual results, as a way of saying, how willing am I to sacrifice my bodily experience, my bodily comfort, in order to produce energetic purification and spiritual effects. So there's so much to be said about how the industry itself has shaped it. It's not the West that's done this. Especially even the modern yoga, it was packaged in India and exported to the West. So there's so much to say about this. I understand that in a blog, it's hard to really understand the key issues that I'm trying to point out, as well as the authority that I have on the subject, because I'm not just a Vinyasa teacher and I'm not trying to say edgy and slandery things to sell my yoga teacher training, which is a criticism that I received, I think, 3 times, which is definitely not the point of this information, but is definitely going to call a lot into question for people who practice Vinyasa, who identify with a Vinyasa teacher, that haven't gone through that fire of questioning. And I know a lot of my own teachers and other teachers out there have been through that fire of questioning. So this conversation is so welcome because they've already questioned their integrity deeply. They've gone to rock bottom with their own integrity. They've stopped teaching because they couldn't quite find out, what is this practice? What does it mean to me? And what do I for sure know about it that I can feel confident in teaching? I've had that reflected back to me, and that's totally my own story, is that I went to real rock bottom. if I had to build up a practice from scratch that I was 100% sure that I knew that every single piece was coherent, where it came from, how it worked, the effect that it was producing, what would that practice look like? And what's more likely to have happened is like exactly what happened when I first learned yoga with all my different teacher trainings, was that I adopted the teaching and what they said about the lineage, what they said yoga was, what they said yoga wasn't, what they said was good and bad. And that's the first stage of learning. Maybe we can also link the podcast about the 4 stages of seeking. When we start our spiritual practice, the first stage is we have to adopt. You got to adopt something and you have to believe it. You have to have faith and trust that it could work. So you really give it your best shot. And then we go through the different questioning phases. So much to talk about. I mean, I hope you listen to this on like 0.75 speed because I've tried to squeeze a lot in here and I've spoken quite quickly through it. But there's lots of interesting bits if you feel to go back through, or you could take notes and come and let me know every single thing that you disagreed about. I would love to hear it. I'm here for the friction. I'm here for the understanding how things have landed with you. And if you think I could have said something better in a different way, or something I said was either misrepresenting or out of integrity, please let me know because I'm so open for those conversations. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen through all of this. And I look forward to chatting with you soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Spirituality Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe by pressing the plus button on iTunes or the following button on Spotify. This is going to ensure that this resource is available and top of mind when you most need it. So please subscribe now.